this is my BMW M235i. I've owned it for about 9 or 10 months now, something like that, and I thought I would finally get around to doing a proper review of it. Now, despite me trying to make this look as professional as I can with all the sliding shots and everything, this is definitely going to be a very amateur review. For anyone who's not familiar with our channel, I'm not a car journalist or anything, I don't normally review cars, so this is just an honest opinion from someone who's owned the car for a few months. And opinion is probably the key word there. Don't take any of this as fact really, this is just my thoughts on the car. If you're interested in the car, go and test drive one yourself. Don't pay too much attention to reviews, because everyone has different opinions. But yeah, hopefully I can provide a bit of information, give a bit of feedback from somebody who's actually lived with the car, and maybe point out a few things that other reviews haven't mentioned. So with that out of the way, let's start with the performance figures. So peak power is 320 brake horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque, which I believe is about 450 newton meters. I might be completely wrong there, look that up yourself if you need to know it in newton meters. The engine itself is a 3 litre 6-cylinder inline 6, and it's also got a turbocharger. It's pretty quick. We'll get on to exactly how it feels to drive in a minute, but yeah, they're the headline figures. So this has got reverse camera, parking sensors all around. It's the 8-speed automatic, which is I think it's the ZF8, is it? ZF8 gearbox. Heated seats, air conditioning, dual zone, climate control. Probably something else that I've forgotten. Oh, it's got the optional 19-inch wheels. For some reason, I can't remember why, but they kind of got thrown in for free with the car. So how does it feel to drive? What's the performance like in terms of straight line speed and acceleration? We'll get onto handling in a minute, but for now, let's just talk about the speed. If we just go, we're in second gear and just floor it. See how quickly we get through the gears. Now I was short shifting a little bit there, but the reason I kind of shift at about 5,000 RPM is it tends to feel like there's not much more to give after that. Although in the official specifications, I believe it says the peak torque is made at about 6,000 RPM. So yeah, apparently it's best to sort of rev it all the way out, but it doesn't really feel like it to me. It feels like you get a big band of torque in the sort of middle of the revs, and then it kind of dies out a bit. If you leave it in automatic mode, in sport mode, and just floor it and let it change gear when it wants, it does rev it pretty much right to the red line. So maybe that is the fastest way to drive it, but for me personally, I tend to short shift a little bit because it just feels like you get back into the sort of meat of the torque power band. It does accelerate pretty well before the turbo even kicks in. Like in the GT86 that I've got, because that's fairly low power anyway, when the turbo kicks in you really notice, like you suddenly start going a lot faster. In this, you've obviously got a 3 litre 6-cylinder engine anyway, so it's got a decent amount of poke before the turbo's even doing anything. And in terms of real world like acceleration rather than just the feeling of acceleration, it's pretty rapid, to be honest. Like when I've been out driving with other people in like a Nissan 350Z, Subarus, all sorts of things, supercars even, this keeps up pretty damn well, or in fact it's faster than some of them. So yeah, it's quite deceiving because it looks like a normal BMW 2 Series really. It doesn't stand out, but we'll come to looks later on. And yet it goes really, really well. And flappy paddles are always fun. The novelty is kind of worn off for me, I guess, but it's still fun. On a track day that I did in this, they were quite useful because you can just focus on your line, you can focus on the corners and the braking, rather than having to take your hand off and change gear and rev match and all that sort of stuff, which is fun, and I quite enjoy that side of track driving. But if you're just trying to go as fast as you possibly can, automatics are always going to be a little bit better than a human can be, really, especially dual clutch. But even this, I mean, this does change gear really quickly. So like if I floor it and I press the pedal, it changes instantly, like just like snapping your fingers. Same with the downshifts. One downside of the flappy paddles is that they sound a little bit cheap and plasticky. So yeah, it's not great, but to be honest, you don't notice that when you're driving it so much. It's a lot louder when you're just stationary, like in that video clip. Because you've got such a lot of torque fairly low down and in the mid-range, it's great for overtaking. You don't have to be absolutely thrashing it. You can just press a flappy paddle, drop a gear, zoom straight around someone. You don't have to rev it right to the red line or anything like that to get past people. If you get into like 5th or 6th gear, the power starts to drop off kind of noticeably. It's not really abrupt or anything, but I'd say it's great for accelerating up to about 110, 120 miles an hour, which, let's be honest, that's more than enough for the road for most people. Obviously, you shouldn't be doing any more than 60 or 70, but yeah. So yeah, it's great for accelerating up to that kind of speed, but then after that, it does seem to drop off a bit. You do notice, especially on the track, you notice once you get into like the top of 5th gear, the start of 6th gear, it's not really pulling anywhere near as much as it was. Because it like throws me back in the seat there, so that's all the way through 3rd, 4th. And yeah, so it still pulls up to any kind of speed that you'd need to do on the road, really. It's fine for. Like for most people, this would be more than enough in terms of kind of straight line speed. The interior overall, I think, is a pretty nice place to be. It's not quite up there with Audi, I wouldn't say, but it's close. It's certainly better than a lot of cars that I've been in. There's pretty nice materials used in most places. Even though there are some hard plastics, I think most of them look pretty good, to be honest. They've mostly got a sort of smooth black finish, so they look quite decent. It's a pretty comfortable car for long drives. Obviously, you've got convenience things like heated seats and air conditioning. You can adjust the seats a lot, you can adjust the steering wheel a lot, get everything in the ideal position for you. There's plenty of space to store things as well. There's little cubby holes in the doors. There's 2 sort of cup holder things that have got like some slots kind of built into them, which you can take out, and then you've got a full cup holder. There's the armrest that's got some storage in it. Then there's the BMW iDrive system, which is displayed on this screen. The screen looks like it should kind of pop up and go down, but it doesn't, it just stays there. It's pretty straightforward. The kind of owner's handbook is all built into that as well, which is quite useful because say it pops up saying, oh, you need to top the oil up, you can just click on a button from that sort of warning and it'll take you straight to the page in the owner's handbook where it'll tell you exactly which oils you need to use. So that's actually quite handy. Sat-nav and everything works pretty well. In fact, out of every car I've ever owned, I think this is probably the best sat-nav system I've used. That's not saying much at the moment because in the R8 you can't even put a full postcode in and the GT86 doesn't have sat-nav at all. But yeah, even counting previous cars that I've owned, this is probably one of the better ones. The dash cluster right in front of the driver I think is pretty busy. Even though there is a lot of information on the dashboard, one thing that's not there is any kind of temperature gauge for the coolant or the oil or anything. I was kind of annoyed at that because you don't want to start thrashing the car before the oil's up to temperature, but you've got no way of knowing how long that takes. So I got this aftermarket gauge from p3cars.com. This is not in any way an advertisement for them, but that's where I bought it from in case anybody else wants to get one. And that just literally plugs into the OBD port. I installed it myself, so if I can do it, anyone can. And then just takes up sort of half of one of the vents. So overall, I think the interior is pretty good. It's nice and modern. It's nice and comfortable for long journeys. There's plenty of places to stick things. Yeah, so I think it's pretty good. Okay, let's talk about handling. Cornering, braking, steering feel, that kind of thing. Now, it depends what cars you've come from. This feels better to me than the Seat Leon Cupra that I had for a couple of years, which is a hot hatch like the Megane 250, the Focus RS, that kind of thing. So this feels a lot better than that, but obviously it's not going to be as nimble and as good in the corners as a smaller 2-seater sports car. I mean, the GT86 that I've got, that feels a lot better in terms of handling, even though I know it's not 2 seats, but it basically is. The rear 2 seats in the 86 are completely useless, so I think of it as a 2-seater. Yeah, that feels better in terms of handling, but then it's way less practical. Like I say, the rear seats are useless. It's got nowhere near as big a boot. It's not as roomy inside at all. The interior is not as nice. So yeah, this wins out in a lot of other areas, but if we're talking purely about handling, this is never going to match up completely with a 2-seater small sports car. But having said that, it is still pretty good. I've done track days in it and it's been a lot of fun. It's not really a track focused car at all, so you can kind of tell, I mean, especially the brakes, but we'll get onto that in a second. You can kind of tell that you are taking a road car to the track, if you know what I mean. Had quite a few fun oversteer moments, even though this hasn't got a limited slip diff. It's got, it's like an electronic version that kind of mimics the effect of a limited slip diff. I think it uses the brakes to do it. So on the track it was pretty fun. On the road it's also pretty good. It's relatively soft, I guess, so it soaks up bumps pretty well. If you put it in sport mode, it stiffens it up a little bit, but it's not a massive amount. So it's pretty good for fast road driving, especially around here where you've got fairly bumpy roads. Like the suspension isn't, it's not sort of crashy. You don't get really harsh bangs or bumps. It's just kind of, you feel the bumps, don't get me wrong, like just then. You go over a pothole or a bump or whatever and you feel it, but it's not unpleasant, if you know what I mean. The suspension just sort of deals with it. You know, it's not like being in a Rolls Royce or something. You're not sort of gliding around everywhere, but it's not uncomfortable, it's not unpleasant, so it's kind of a good balance, really. But yeah, I went for a drive the other day with a few more sporty cars in this. There was an Aston Martin, Nissan 350Zs, Toyota Sora, Nissan Silvia, a few other things. I mean, on the straights, especially with the auto gearbox, this had an advantage over a lot of the cars that were there. And in the corners, it didn't struggle either. Like, I was expecting to struggle in the corners and under braking, but this actually handled pretty well. There were a lot of really tight, bumpy, twisty country roads, and yeah, it's kept up with everything. I'm not going to say easily, like, I was having to try, but yeah, the car wasn't really the limiting factor. It was probably my driving skill or lack of that was the limiting factor. Now, whether it would keep up with more modern sports cars like you know, like a Porsche Cayman or something like that, I don't know. Probably not. Now, let's get to a couple of the things that I'm not so keen on about handling and braking and everything. On the first track day I did in this, the brakes were terrible, which got a lot better once I changed the brake fluid. I put some Castrol SRF brake fluid in, and that helped a lot. But yeah, before that, you do literally like 3 laps and the brakes would just be like a sponge. But yeah, like even with the new brake fluid, like on the road, I'm still not crazily keen on the brakes. There's just, you don't get that much initial bite. Like, there's not a lot happens for the first bit of sort of travel on the pedal, which I don't like. It doesn't give me much confidence in the brakes. Like, it does slow down okay if you proper stamp on the brakes, but I don't like to have to be like pressing the pedal really hard to slow down a fair bit. And the other thing that I'm not so keen on is the steering. It's in comfort mode, which is the default mode that it starts in every time you drive it. It's really light, which is good for driving around like this, like where you're not really throwing it into corners or just cruising around town or whatever, just motorway driving. It's useful for that, having light steering, but for any kind of spirited driving, it's not so good. So you put it in sport mode, it stiffens it up a bit, makes the steering a bit heavier. So yeah, in sport mode it's better, but it's still not amazing. Like, the weight of it is fine in sport mode, but you just don't get much feedback. Like, you feel quite disconnected from what the wheels are actually doing. And I know that sounds a little bit like something like a proper car journalist would say, and it seems a bit weird me saying it, like I'm not a pro racing driver or anything, you wouldn't think I'd notice, but you do notice it is a little bit numb. It's not quite as bad as some Audis I've driven. Some Audi hatchbacks that I've been in before have been really numb, and the steering weight sort of changes depending on your speed and stuff. I don't like that. So this is better than that. It's not terrible. Yeah, like, it doesn't ruin the experience or anything. It's not terrible. You're not constantly thinking, oh god, I don't know what the wheels are doing at all. You can still drive it through corners fast and still have fun, but it could be a little better, that's all. I mean, there is a little bit of body roll, but it's not massively noticeable, and it depends what car you're coming from as well. Like I say, this feels better than the hot hatches that I've had before, but not quite as good as the GT86 in terms of how flat it is, and obviously especially not as good as the R8, but kind of goes without saying. But yeah, like if you're getting out of a car like that into this will feel a bit sort of sloppy. But yeah, I think if you're coming from a hot hatch or something like that, or a bigger car, then yeah, this will feel pretty good. I'll give my thoughts on the exterior briefly, but obviously it's a very subjective thing. Different people are going to have different opinions on it. Overall, I really like the look of it. I think from the front and the side especially, it looks great. From the back, I could kind of take or leave it, but I don't dislike it, so it's fine. For me, it's a car that kind of just blends in with the traffic fairly well, and I appreciate some people won't want that. Some people will want something that stands out a bit more, but I'm happy for this car to just kind of blend in. I think, to be honest, that makes it a bit of a more sort of mature, sporty car, if that makes sense. It's not all boy racery and look at me kind of thing. The colour that it's in is Esterol Blue, which seems to be what almost every single 2 Series comes in now. That seems to be what most people choose them in, because it is quite a nice colour. The overall finish of the paint, it's kind of the typical orange peel effect that you get on most modern cars these days, so it's not any worse than any other car, certainly, but yeah, I do wish they would kind of get rid of that and just make it properly shiny rather than all sort of dappled and orange peely. So overall, I think it's a great looking car, but it's not, a massive head turner. It's not going to get loads of attention, which, like I've said, for me is perfect. But if you're looking for something that's going to get a lot of attention, then this probably isn't the car for you. Let's talk about practicality, reliability, running costs, that side of things. That's one thing it does very well. It's very practical, very easy to drive, very accessible. especially in this automatic setup. There's 4 seats, not 5 seats unfortunately, but personally I don't very often need to take 5 people anywhere. It's normally just sort of 2 or 3, so it's fine. The boot space is actually pretty good, considering this is only the 2 series rather than the 3 series, so it should be a bit smaller. Still feels like you've got plenty of room. There's plenty of leg room in the back and the front, plenty of boot space. Yeah, I'm not really sure how much bigger the 3 series is, but this is more than big enough for me. So economy wise, you can actually get really good fuel economy out of this if you drive it sensibly. As well as the comfort and sport mode, there's an eco mode. So if you're going on a long motorway drive or whatever, just stick it in eco mode, leave it in automatic, drive along at 70 miles an hour, you can get 41 miles per gallon, which for a car that has got 320 brake and can go this fast, it's pretty impressive, I think. There's automatic start-stop. I'm not sure if that was an optional extra or if that's standard. I believe it's standard. But yeah, so there's that, which obviously cuts the engine out whenever you stop, which is useful, you know. It saves you just wasting petrol while you're sat there. Now, I know I mentioned you can get 40 miles to the gallon if you're sensible. Let's just say like a mixture of, you know, fast driving and sensible driving. You'll get sort of high 20s, maybe 30 miles to the gallon if you're lucky. If you're just thrashing it like a track day or something, you'll get like 10. So yeah, there's quite a range there. It does depend how you drive it. But yeah, at least you know if you do want to save fuel, you can just drive it sensibly in eco mode, and you can get sort of high 30s, 40 miles per gallon, which again, I think is impressive for a car like this. One slightly strange thing in this car is visibility. You would think it'd be a very good car for visibility, and for the most part it is. Obviously forward, sideways. The back is not great, but you've got the reverse camera. There's no rear windscreen wiper on the back, so if it gets rainy or muddy, you can't see. But the strange thing is the wing mirrors are right where you want to look. Like if you're going around a roundabout or turning out of a tight junction or turning into a tight junction or whatever, the wing mirror always seems to be obscuring the bit of the curb that you want to see. And I thought maybe that's just me, but when a friend drove it, he said the exact same thing. They just get in the way a lot. When you're going around roundabouts, you're often kind of blind as to where the actual curb of the roundabout is. And you have to just sort of guess, which is a little bit unnerving. But yeah, for the most part, visibility is good. That's the only kind of annoyance with that. Which brings me on to one slight issue I have had with this car, and it's the only problem I have had, is that occasionally, and we're probably talking only once every couple of months, so it's not a big deal, but occasionally you'll put your foot down and not a lot happens. Like for ages, like the revs will be building slowly, but you're not getting anywhere near as much power as normal. I know somebody else who's got a 135i, which is essentially the same car, and he said that he had the same problem. He took it to BMW, they had to replace a fan. It's like a common fault with one of the fan units, I think, and that solved the problem. Because when this problem happens, you notice as well that the fan is running really loudly, and even after you stop the engine, the fan's still running for a good like 2 or 3 minutes afterwards. So yeah, if you get that problem, take it to BMW. I've not got around to doing it yet because, like I say, it only happens once every month or 2. But yeah, take it to BMW. Apparently they'll fix it under warranty, and yeah, no problem. It turns out that sound is quite fake. Basically a synthesized sound played through the car speakers to sound like a fast engine, which most people, in fact everyone, seems to think is pretty shit. So I don't really know why they do it. They do it in the new M3 as well, and they do it in this, even though the sales guy, when I bought this, told me that they don't do it in this. Now it's weird because it does actually sound quite good from outside this car. You don't tend to hear that even if you've got the windows open when you're driving. It's only when you're stationary and you put it in neutral and rev it. But I've heard it a couple of times when I've just been at sort of low speed and second gear. So it does still do it when you're driving along. Yeah, I think it sounds quite cool. I think it sounds quite good. Also, just while we're mentioning sound in general, the speakers and the sound system in this are pretty decent. Certainly a lot better than in the GT86, way better. You've got Bluetooth streaming for music. You've obviously got an aux port, sorry. But yeah, it's a pretty decent sound system. I'm sure it's not going to win any awards or whatever. It's not got the most bass or anything compared to like custom setups or anything like that. But overall, for a standard car, standard sound system, it's pretty good. So to give a summary then, I would say this car is good at a lot of things. In fact, almost everything. It's not like absolutely insane acceleration or absolutely crazy cornering speeds or whatever, but it's above average, especially for its price point. It's well above average for most things. It's not like a jack of all trades where it can do everything just kind of all right. It does everything better than average. And I think it's a great mixture of practicality, economy, but also power and fun. You know, you can go to a track day in it. Like I say, change the brake fluid first. You can do a track day, you can overtake almost anyone on the road, you can drift it if you really want to, but then you can also just sit in automatic, comfortable mode, get 40 miles to the gallon. I mean, it looks good, at least in my opinion. It's got a nice modern interior, you've got lots of sort of mod cons, you can fit 4 people in it, you can fit your golf clubs in the boot. Not that I play golf, but that seems to be the standard measurement for boot space, so we'll use that. And then you can get onto a fun country road and just go for a blast. I think it's a great all-around car, and I think if I had to get rid of all of my other cars, I think this would be the one that I would keep. And as weird as that sounds, when I've got an R8 and stuff, you think I'd want to keep that. In reality, like in the real world of just driving around doing normal things, going shopping, just blending into traffic and whatever, but then also being fun to drive, this is the best all-rounder by far. I wouldn't want to take an R8 to Tesco's every day or have to park it in some sketchy neighbourhood or whatever. Like, this is a great all-round car that's, like I say, above average at most things. The brakes let it down a bit, the steering feel lets it down a little bit, but other than that, I can't fault it. And for the price, this to me is so much of a better deal than the new M3 and M4. The M3 and M4 are great cars, don't get me wrong. I know a lot of people saw our review of the M3 and M4 and thought we hated it for some reason, even though we didn't say that at all, but they're good cars, but just for the amount of money, this or even the new M2, if they bring that out, it's a kind of way better value for money really. It's got almost as much as the M3 and M4 in terms of performance and practicality and everything else, but for way less money. So yeah, I think this is a great car, great value for the amount of money. When you look at the competitors, when you look at what else you could get for this money, I think this is a lot better than most competitors. So yeah, that's it. That's my review. Quite a lengthy review by now, I think. I've filmed like 45 minutes of me talking here, so I'm trying to edit that down a bit. If there's anything that you liked or didn't like about this review, or the format of it, or the things that I did or didn't touch upon, then let me know so that we can try and make the next one better. But yeah, for now, that's it. I'll see you in the next video.